welcome everyone. This is a really exciting episode. I'm very pleased and very thankful to have with me Pastor Rock Fremont. As you're going to soon find out, Rock is a part of just about everything interfaith in Arizona and nationally. He does a lot of wonderful things, and he's actually the president of the Arizona Interfaith Movement. So I feel a little bit of pressure to make sure we get this right. But Rock, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks. I had to say yes to this. I'm very honored to have been asked and to be with you, my friend.
Well, this is truly a joy, so thank you. As many of you know, those who have listened to previous episodes, the mission of the Arizona Interfaith Movement reads as follows. Our mission is to build bridges of understanding, respect, and support among diverse people of faith through education, dialogue, service, and the implementation of the Golden Rule. And so, as
Mm.
Pastor Rock and I start talking, we are going to talk a little bit about this, his experience in this thing and that thing, but most of all, to all of our listeners, I hope you can catch a little bit of what we all respect in Rock, Pastor Rock, and how he's such a crucial part of the communities that he's involved in. And so let's just go ahead and get started. Um, Rock, why don't you tell us a little bit about you. Tell us where you were born. Tell us about a little bit about how you grew up, your childhood, what you were like as a youngster. Just a little bit about you.
Oh, Justin, this could be scary for people. I don't know that people really want to know me in that way, but I was born in Ohio, and my family moved out here when I was in kindergarten in the early '80s here to Arizona, and my dad actually uh, was part of building what we know today as the I-10, kind of continuing that out to the
All
West Valley,
right.
way West Valley. And then my mom, her brother was already out here and had a farm, so I kind of grew up in this construction farming family, and in
Wow.
Levine in the Southwest Valley,
Perfect.
and
Okay.
that's where I live today. So other than educational endeavors, I've kind of stayed put in Levine for most of my life.
And so just maybe talk about that for a minute. You grew up, did school in Levine. You said you've had some educational adventures. Where did your education take you post high school?
Well, post high school, I went to Grand Canyon University, which was then Grand Canyon College, still connected with the Southern Baptist Convention, and
Awesome.
and then I did a master's degree there. I did a master's degree at Campbellsville School of Theology in
Okay.
Kentucky, out of all places. And
Awesome. Awesome.
then my church required me to have what we call a Master of Divinity degree. So I went and completed education at a place called Earlham School of Religion in
Okay.
Richmond, Indiana, which is a Quaker school that shares its
Wow.
campus with a Brethren seminary. So kind of an ecumenical
Wow.
place of unity right there in Indiana, in Richmond, Indiana.
That's
And
fascinating.
I guess I should say I grew up at a little kind of a community church called South Mountain Community Church. It was back when there wasn't even a LDS ward building here in Levine. There was just a Southern Baptist church. So uh,
Wow. Wow.
when I was in maybe fourth grade, fifth grade, I decided for whatever reason that I wanted to start going to church. So I went to my
Hmm.
mom and I said, we should go to church. So we did not go to church. And
Really?
I found out that my great aunt went to South Mountain Community Church, which was kind of our family church.
Uh-huh.
And so I started getting my mom out of bed on Sunday morning, and
Really?
she enjoyed sleeping in on Sundays, as did the rest of the family. And
Uh-huh.
so my mom and I would go to church on Sunday morning.
So this kind of began early for you. You just had this pull towards the church community. Was it friends that kind of got you involved in church and in the community that way, or did you just kind of feel drawn to it?
I felt drawn to it. I can't, thinking back to the story and how that happened, I really can't see or remember anyone in my life in terms of influence, that said this is something that you should do. It was
Hmm.
something that, I look back and I would say that it's the spirit today.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so we went to that church, and my first pastor there, David Reagan,
Mhm.
was I mean, really wonderful. And I told my mom, I said, I want to do this every Sunday.
That's
And
incredible.
it was a small church. It was what we call in mainline Protestant in the mainline Protestant tradition, we would call it a federated church. So
Okay.
that's when two or more, in some cases, churches of differing denominational backgrounds merge together
Yeah.
to journey together. So this idea of accompaniment or
Hmm.
unity was really modeled for me early on. And so that was a congregation of the United Church of Christ, which I am today, and the
Okay.
United Methodist Church.
Okay. Which, let's just go ahead and pause just for a minute. I haven't even introduced your role right now locally as a pastor. Do you mind just sharing with us where you pastor, and can you also share with us the unique nature of that setup? Because it's not just, I'll let you go ahead and explain. Go ahead.
Sure. So I pastor a congregation of the United Church of Christ today, and it's also duly affiliated with the International Council of Community Churches. And the community church movement is a very interesting one. It's a denomination of sorts, but
Hmm.
it was two movements of Christians who came together. One was predominantly African American, an African American grouping of churches, and one was an Anglo grouping of churches. And they came together to model, like so many churches did,
Yeah.
surprisingly, to model Jesus's prayer in John 17 that we may all be one. And
Wonderful.
and specifically the community church movement was founded on
Hmm.
that racial justice
Yeah.
unity.
And so you participate in this bigger picture of not just a single congregation, but looking at, I don't know if you'd call it a federation of sorts today, or you just call it, um, I'm not sure what the right way to phrase this, but it's a much bigger picture than just one congregation, one denomination, what you're doing.
Sure. So in terms of local church level, I'm a local church pastor. And one of the things that I love about being a local pastor and serving the people of Shepherd of the Hills United Church of Christ is I would hope that most pastors would say this, but being a pastor is a very humbling thing because when you think
Hmm.
about it, where else in life, where else in one's professional life can you journey with people from, the birth of a baby
Yeah.
to transitioning to hospice
Wow. Yeah.
to
That's so true.
to to then journeying with their families uh, to celebrate their life.
Hmm.
So it really is this womb to tomb of
Yeah.
sorts. And so then
Absolutely.
at a bigger level, I serve as vice president of ecumenical and interfaith relations for the Council of Community Churches. And that is a role that I'll serve in at least for the next 3 years. And
Okay.
that offers me the ability, also very humbling, to serve in spaces like the National Council of Churches in the
Yeah.
United States, which we're a part of. Many of our mainline churches and our Eastern Orthodox churches are all part of what we call the National Council of Churches in the
Hmm.
United States, and then also serving at the World Council of Church level. So it allows me to get around to a few tables.
Well, to say the least, and not only that, you're also, serving as president of the Arizona Interfaith Movement. and you seem to gather at so many other interfaith organizations at their coming togethers, at their whatever it might be. I just find that you're everywhere. You're everywhere all the time. I don't know how you do it, Rock. I don't know how you somehow duplicate who you are and just, put yourself out there, but it's really quite amazing as you start to look at your schedule and how you have to determine what's most important of all these different levels and layers of leadership and the local pastoral care that you give to your congregation. And not only that, but to your family. And so, I mean, all of that is very, I think you're right, it's very humbling. Can you share with us just a little bit, what what are some of the things that you've experienced in these layers of leadership that has caused you to have a bigger picture of the work you're doing, something that's helped you find, okay, here's some purpose, here's some real reason behind all of these different things that you're a part of. What are some experiences you've had that just kind of help paint the big picture of all the work that you're involved in?
Well, you kind of primed the pump with that question, and I instantly thought of something. It's a bit maybe a bit strange, but let's see. I have a I had an opportunity to work at a place called the Justice Center, which was or is, it continues to exist today. It's an urban ministry of the United Methodist Church in downtown Phoenix at 10th Avenue and Jefferson.
Mhm.
And they specifically served those that are most vulnerable among us, specifically homeless seniors or unsheltered seniors that are experiencing homelessness. And I I performed two roles there. My ministry was two different things. I was a chaplain, so I would lead worship and Bible studies in the chapel on Sunday, and at other times prayer, meditation. So that was kind of the pastoral side of what I did at the Justice
Yeah.
Center. And
Hmm.
then I was the housing coordinator.
Hmm.
And so that role made me a social worker of sorts. And I had the ability or the opportunity to step into that role of social worker, which which was so humbling and such
Hmm.
a sacred role to, as I mentioned before, that ministry of accompaniment, of
Yeah.
walking alongside someone who was really going through trials in life. And I remember uh, a young woman in her mid 70s coming in, and she came into my office, and I, anytime I'm performing a pastoral function, I generally wear a clerical collar. And so she came in, she knocked on my door, and she's 5 feet and some inches.
Hmm.
And she came in, and me sitting in my chair, we were about the same height.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And she said she started to cry, and she'd experienced a lot in her life in terms of uh, well, she'd been through it. We'll say that. She'd been through
Yeah.
it. And so she shared her heart with me. She shared her life with me. And she went over to Cass, which is the main shelter, and she said, I can't stay there. I got to get out of there.
Mm.
I don't feel safe there. And what where can I go?
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel that it was safe for her to be there because she didn't feel safe. And so I think, looking back on that, I think I put her at Missionaries of Charity, which is another shelter that Mother
Hmm.
Teresa's nuns run here in town. I think I got her in there. It's a small shelter, very
Yeah.
clean. She stayed there for a while until we could transition her into her own housing and, kind of
Wow.
going through as a
Yeah.
social worker, but also as a pastor,
Yes. Yeah.
accompany that
Yeah.
idea of accompaniment. What does it look like to collect all of the paperwork needed to transition into affordable housing? You need a
Hmm.
driver's
Yeah.
license, you need a social security award letter, uh, you need a birth certificate, and
Hmm.
tracking all of that information down if you're unsheltered.
That's a nightmare.
You need a social security card. And so
Yeah.
I would find myself during the day doing things like going to the social security office and going to the DMV and helping to obtain a new driver's license or state ID card, and then just sitting down with people uh, to fill out an application for
Yeah.
affordable housing, knowing, that many of them are going to wait 12 or more months. That was 10 years ago uh,
Mm-hmm.
for housing. Now that number could be much higher.
Yep.
Uh, so she, I walked alongside her. She came to church at the shelter every Sunday.
Mm.
And when the bishop, since I was serving in the United Methodist system, moved me to a new church, she followed along. And then when I announced that I'd be transitioning to serve a church of my own denomination, she followed along. And she, continues to uh, journey with me.
Yeah.
And she's now a deacon in the congregation
Wow.
that I serve in.
Wow.
And she shares her story, and she's very thankful to me. But I mean, honestly, I'm thankful for her, for her
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be able to have her in my life as a witness. And I think that from that, just that sense of those defining moments
Yeah.
as pastor, as human beings,
Hmm.
is really what it's about. Uh, are all about coming into proximity with the other.
Mm.
It's so easy to demonize. It's so easy to have ideas about why people might be homeless, or, you know, why people are the way they are anyway,
Yeah.
and to demonize the other. But, her situation, she was a nurse.
Wow.
She had a retirement, and, uh, she fell on hard times. And there was
Yeah.
story after story after
Yeah.
story like
Yeah.
that. Uh, Others would experience a fall in their home and break a hip, maybe. And then, we know how long rehab can go for.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And if you're disconnected from your family, you have no
Hmm.
support system, you get evicted. Just this last month, the Metro Phoenix area had the highest eviction rate than we ever have had in history.
Mm.
And so at that time, the rehab centers, take uh, they would take folks and they would drop them off in what we call the zone
Wow.
and say, "This is where you can get help." It was a very common story to hear, that
Wow.
people would get evicted after having a medical,
Yeah.
happening in their
Happen.
life and being disconnected from their family.
And so your experience in being, and I really find it very instructive and very it's a lot more meaningful when you talk about the proximity factor. And I've heard you say this before, Pastor. You've talked about journeying with people, being with them, and not just who you teach to and who you're going to lead somehow, but this journey with somebody, this proximity. I've noticed that's been kind of a theme in some of your messages and some of the things that I think that maybe perhaps that motivates you is because of the closeness that you've had with people that you've pastored, the people that you've helped. Can I ask you a question that I'm kind of grateful. I'm really grateful that I get to do this interview with you because I feel like I can ask you this question because right in this podcast we're exploring the faith of faith leaders, like the beliefs and what they have in their core. Um,
Mm.
and then also obviously some of their story, which you're sharing. But can you please answer this question? What do those experiences of proximity, those experiences of being with, journeying with individuals, what does that teach you about your faith in your God? What does it teach you about him, his character or nature? What does that help me understand that a little bit more of what that's done for your belief and your how you feel towards
I
him?
would say that's above my pay grade to answer that question. But it, as I reflect on that question, Justin, I instantly think of the Trinity. Uh,
Hmm.
I instantly think of the idea of the incarnation,
Hmm.
and we believe that it's a central tenet that Jesus Christ is God incarnate for
Hmm.
us. And Eugene Patterson's The Message Bible, I love it. In one place, it says that God pitched a tent among
Hmm.
us.
Hmm.
And some of the great saints, I instantly
Yeah.
think of Saint Vincent de Paul.
Oh
There's
yeah.
this beautiful image of Saint Vincent de Paul encountering a beggar, uh,
Hmm.
and he offers this beggar food. And in
Yeah.
in in the offering of this loaf of bread is often how it's pictured. The beggar's face becomes the face of Christ.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think of other holy men and women who have gone before us. From the Methodist tradition, I think of John Wesley,
Yeah.
the founder of Methodism, who did so much to revive the church of his time
Hmm.
and a great evangelist. But what was
Hmm.
so interesting for me about his life is that he was a priest in the Church of England in this country, the Episcopal Church. And that meant that he went to seminary. He had all of these childhood experiences. He did X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
wasn't until after he was ordained that he writes in his journal that he felt that his heart was strangely warmed. And so
Interesting.
for me,
Yeah.
it's this ministry of proximity, this
Hmm.
ministry of accompaniment,
Yeah.
where I have come into touch with myself,
Mm.
and where I've had an opportunity to have my own transformation, because I truly believe that everyone I meet
Hmm.
is the presence of Christ in my midst. And that is a very sacred and
Yes.
holy thing.
Mm. That transformation that you talk about, um, it feels like, at least from my experience, and you can share what you would like, but it feels like that transformation takes place with experience in proximity with others that we are serving, that we're learning about, that we come to bear burdens with, or that we come to help carry or shoulder burdens for, and it feels like that transformation and the softness that comes in our heart and the realization of our great opportunity to do unto others as we'd have them do to us. Just that transformation does happen, but it does seem to come in that, something that I learned or that I was reminded of, whenever someone talks about their neighbor, um, and they look maybe in this, in the Christian text of loving your neighbor, um, the Spanish for that is prójimo, amar al prójimo, which is like more of the proximity and more of like who's
Yeah.
close in that close nature, not just like vecino. There's another word for Spanish which is vecino, which is like neighbor, like in my neighborhood, and he's my vecino. He lives next door to me, but I wouldn't say he's my prójimo. That's like a different meaning. That's like a closeness. It's like a closeness of connection or friendship or even just like physical proximity. And so I just want to say that I admire that so much about you, that you can see that you're not afraid to be close to the people that you're to lead. You're
Oh,
not afraid
thank
of that.
you. Thank you. That means the most to me, Justin. I just, I'm so inspired by Pope Francis's ministry. And I think instantly think of, he tells his priests, he tells his
Mhm.
bishops that they need to smell like their sheep.
There you go. There you
And
go. That does
and
that
and
says
and
it, doesn't it?
that has become a mantra for me. What do I need to do to come into relationship with people to understand, how do
So
I,
good.
just this idea of being a sacramental people, of sitting down at table with someone and
Uh-huh.
learning their stories and breaking bread with them. And
Yeah.
honestly, another biblical story, we think of the road to Emmaus. You
Oh,
know, we
yes.
can we
Yeah.
can walk we can walk with someone, you know,
Uh-huh.
which is
Uh-huh.
is really amazing. It's really important, but it's not until we sit down with someone
Yeah. Yeah.
and that we know Christ in the breaking of the bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so many of our stories as people of faith, not only as Christians, but as people of faith,
Hmm.
model, that
Yes.
ministry of proximity, but
Absolutely.
specifically model the importance of food
Uh-huh.
and what happens around food and bringing people together. I think we
See,
can all relate to that.
I think so. I think so. Just in my last interview, I was with Rana Sodi, and we talked a lot. We talked just for a minute about his involvement in restaurants and in food, and his involvement with experience interfaith and how he brings people together. And there's something really really wonderful about that, about being in their physical presence and sharing something together like that. It really does change some things. But I think I have to remember that phrase, what you said just a minute ago. I've got to remember that. I want you to smell like the sheep. Is that
Yep.
what how did you say it?
Pope Francis told his bishops and his priests that he wants them to smell like their sheep.
That tells you the type of devotion that would be expected of someone in leadership, but also the
Mm,
sacrifice. You've got to learn to give of yourself and to turn away from your own whatever you want to do, your own personal agenda with whatever it is, and it all of a sudden becomes a consuming mission to be with, to bless, and somehow lift those that you've been given a sacred trust and stewardship for.
absolutely. Well, and I also think of Mary as such a great witness to Christians and our Muslim brothers and sisters as well, siblings
Hmm.
throughout the world. Miriam,
Yeah.
and you know, for the Christian,
Uh-huh.
what does it mean for us to model her life?
Yeah.
This and what does it mean to literally birth the divine wherever we
Yeah.
find ourselves?
Interesting. Interesting.
And
Yeah.
model our life off of Mary's yes.
Hmm.
Mm.
Mm. Okay, so Rock, would you just maybe go back for a minute? You've talked and shared some beautiful experiences of things that have shaped you as a pastor, things that have shaped you as a congregational leader. Can you just kind of give us what are some of the core beliefs that you would find within your congregation that someone who would be attending would hear preached or would hear members of the congregation live by? What are some of those core tenets or aspects of your faith?
Sure. So the United Church of Christ tradition is part of what we know. I mean, most people would kind of know what a Lutheran is. There's this.
Hmm.
Most people would probably know what a Presbyterian is, or at least they've heard
Hmm.
of these things. So in
Hmm.
terms of churches, they're big tents, or we might think of them as families. So we have Catholics, we have Lutherans, we have Reformed or Presbyterians. My church, the United Church of Christ, and the Council of Community Churches, were both part of something called the United and Uniting Church tradition.
Okay.
So a much bigger tent, and there are many things that unite and kind of divide us. A lot of people
Okay.
living under the same tent, right?
Right.
and
Right.
and so
Yeah.
you're going to find a lot of different beliefs, but what I really love about being part of my church tradition is that we are ecumenical, and I love to go back to what I call ad fontes, back
Hmm.
to the source, back to the
Yeah.
font, back to the well,
Yes. Uh-huh.
and look at some of those ancient beliefs, and how we can revive them or pull them out of the attic today
There you
and
go.
breathe
Yeah.
some new, put some new flesh on them to
Yeah.
help us better understand where we are today. And I think that the everything's better when
Uh-huh.
you go back to that source, back to that
Hmm.
font.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's interesting how so many of those teachings really speak to people today in our world that
Yes.
is so seemingly chaotic.
Right.
They're looking for some
Hmm.
foundation in their life. and
Hmm.
and what does it mean to be a movement for wholeness in this fragmented world? So those are kind of the
Hmm.
things that
Yeah.
inform my ministry, inform my teaching at the local level.
Yeah.
And then, of course, going back to that ministry of proximity, I hate to harp on
Yeah.
that, but I
No,
do
yeah.
talk a lot about ministry to, ministry for, and ministry with. And
Hmm.
and the idea with everything that we do, I'm trying to move us deeper. So, ministry to someone is
Yeah.
is it's okay, and we need that. We need people to
Hmm.
be merciful. We need people to be generous, and if that's where they're starting, we need to celebrate that. Uh,
Sure. Yeah.
we definitely need ministry for people,
Uh-huh.
but the magic really begins to happen when we have ministry with people.
Hmm.
When I was at the Justice Center, I would remember, especially during the Christmas season, when people are very generous and
Hmm.
wanting to be very giving, they
Hmm.
would just appear down there in vans, and they would jump out of the van when they saw someone that they perceived as unsheltered on the side of a
Uh-huh.
road. And they
Uh-huh.
would run towards that person out of the van, and then they would just give them a bunch of stuff.
Mm.
And one of those things, for instance, was a blanket. Because there was this perception that if you were
Yeah.
homeless, if you were unsheltered, of course you would want a blanket when it was cold outside.
Right.
And that was detached from the fact that once they went to the shelter, if they were staying at Cass, there
Uh-huh.
was a giant trash barrel outside of the shelter. And in order to go into the shelter, you had to just throw it away.
Really.
Because they're struggling with things like bed bugs and
Yeah.
other things that are going on when you're trying to house a group of
Mm.
people.
Yeah.
And so again, going back to that idea of ministry with, so always continuously trying to move people into deeper relational waters, I
Mm.
find, to be the bread and butter
That's so good.
wherever I
That's
go.
right. Yeah. So, so Rock, in some of the time that we have left, maybe I can ask you just a couple questions as we start to head towards the close of this experience. Number one, first of all, thank you again for making yourself available for this. Of all the things you have going on, just the other day you shared with me a couple of the events that you had to do, and I was blown away at how
Oh,
much you have going on every single day. So thank you for your time with us. Um,
seriously, no problem. It's a pleasure.
so Rock, maybe just this first question of the last two that I'll ask is it as we believe in the golden rule, as we believe in treating others as we'd have them treat us, and also as one of the purposes of this podcast is to learn about other people so that we don't have to cast judgment, and so we can actually get away from some of the prejudices or misinformation that we have. We can actually feel compassion and connection with others who think differently than me, who operate differently than I do in their lives, and we don't have to have such great divides. We can work more in harmony with each other. But I guess the question is, but what do you do personally when someone casts judgment on you? What about the personal attacks on Rock Fremont or the church or anything that you're a part of? How do you personally deal with that kind of opposition, persecution, misunderstanding, criticism, call it what you will? How do you deal with that? Can you teach us from your perspective?
Love them harder. Just looking at it, churches are just like any other small faith, any other small community. They're microcosms of the
Hmm.
world, right? Just like
Uh-huh.
our
Uh-huh.
our family.
Sure.
And and so what I have found is that people that I spar with,
Uh-huh.
uh, people that disagree with me specifically. We just had a woman rotate from our church council who had served her term. Her term ran out. It's that type of system,
Okay.
and she is someone that I've had an incredible difficult. No, I wouldn't say difficult. She is someone that I often don't agree with,
Uh-huh.
and she tends to care about things historically. Serving on our board, she cares about things that I would just not care about. I It's not even on my radar.
Uh-huh.
And so we had a congregational meeting. We were required to have one of those each year where the whole congregation comes together, and we welcomed new leadership and we said goodbye to
Mm-hmm.
her and others.
Mm-hmm.
And I said something very nice about each person that was rotating off. And when I got to this person, I said, I'm going to be I'm going to be a little vulnerable here because she has always had a sense that we kind of go
Uh-huh.
back and forth and maybe agitate each other in different
Okay.
ways. And so I said, I'm going to be transparent, be a little bit vulnerable here, and just say that, out of all people, I really hate to see her go because out of everyone on the board, that pretty much everybody says yes, or, nobody puts up much resistance to the pastor in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
And and I have found our relationship to be incredibly beneficial for my life because she's
Yeah.
providing me with some resistance. Has historically provided me with other ways of seeing, things that were just never on my radar.
Right. Yeah.
And so to look at those people in our lives, instead of pushing them away, pull them closer. I also remember there were these scientific catalogs that I remember growing up, and maybe that
Hmm.
ages me, but there were these little rock tumblers, and I think they came
Hmm.
from National Geographic magazine or
Yeah.
something.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so you'd go, they'd encourage you to go around and get rocks, and you'd put those rocks in that tumbler with some
Okay.
water. And over time, those rocks would become smooth.
Hmm.
And I think that communities of faith, regardless of where we find ourselves, a
Yeah.
good community of faith, any good community of faith will do just that.
Mm.
It's like going into that rock tumbler and all of those jagged edges of our lives, all of those little inconsistencies are
Hmm.
slowly smoothed away.
Mm.
And so for me, that's the spiritual life. That's what
Yeah.
this entire endeavor is about. It's working
Yeah.
on my own stuff. And by working on our own stuff, uh, by uncovering our own wholeness, we somehow find the wholeness of the world.
Mm.
We need more whole people. We need more people that are working as those in recovery circles say. We need
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
to be working on their recovery.
Right.
What our Muslim friends say. They say that you don't. I we were just talking about this the other day. You
Yes.
don't convert to Islam. Islam has reverts because there's this idea that we're uncovering who we're
Hmm.
truly intended to be.
Yeah.
A-
Yeah.
And I believe that to be the case for all communities of faith, that we're merely uncovering. Jesus, uh, another great prophet, talks about this very thing where he says that where he's talking about children and this idea of uncovering and being childlike.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
returning to that core,
Hmm.
and everything that I think of a child to be: vulnerable, trusting, uh,
Hmm.
yet curious. These
Right.
are the things that we need more of in our world. Sharing.
They do that well too, don't they? Most of the time. And so if I'm hearing you, if I'm understanding, I mean that first example of that good sister that was on the board and that you worked with, and it feels like you valued the opportunity in some regard of maybe the conflict that came because of your interaction with her, and you chose to see it in a way that allowed for refinement, in a way that allowed for you to grow and kind of become who you needed to be, instead of seeing her as just opposition and as just an antagonist towards you, right? And so we can kind of see the world around us and also expect it. I think I heard that too, that that's just part of what we might just expect being in communities of faith, or of being a diverse group of people in our neighborhoods with a variety of nationalities and religious beliefs. We ought to expect that there's going to be misunderstandings and things that come up that we just don't understand one another. However, if we can see this as an opportunity to refine ourselves and to learn and to hear, we don't have to be afraid of those moments. In fact, it might even be building us if we use those moments for what they ought to be, as growth and as a way to connect and hear somebody else.
Absolutely. At a national level, I serve several dialogue groups for the National Council of Churches: Hindu Christian dialogue, Buddhist Christian dialogue, and Sikh Christian dialogue. And there's this concept of what we call receptive ecumenism, but I think it's just the idea of receptivity and
Yeah.
being receptive to the other wherever we find ourselves,
Mm.
and to look,
Hmm.
look for that wholeness, and
Hmm.
and more importantly, be kind to one another. um,
Yes.
I was out on a walk the other day, and as we look around our communities and we see how unwhole we are, especially in
Yeah.
terms of those that are in the margins. Seemingly, we're seeing them
Yeah.
in more places than ever. We're
Hmm.
seeing people camp outside, and one of these individuals came up to me and was, was trying to attack me, and I got away. But in this interaction, I thought, I walked away from that, and I thought, well, maybe I should have called the police. And then I thought, well, I didn't really want this person to have a police interaction. And it
Yeah.
was a I was on my earbuds,
Uh-huh.
and I think they were concerned. As they were screaming at me, they were concerned that I was following them to their place where they were camping.
Yeah.
And so as I broke that open and kind of ran that through in my own mind, I thought,
Yeah.
well, you know, this is, as Martin Luther talks about, we don't get to choose our neighbors. We don't choose our neighbors. Some of us do today, I
Sure.
suppose. But this person, more than anything else, this person is my neighbor.
Hmm.
Think about that. And so if we could get to that point from conflict to this realization that we are in this together,
Yes.
and that I'm being called into a deeper relationship. You know, I don't know that I was looking to be called into relationship in that way,
Interesting.
but
Interesting.
but
Yes.
what does it mean for me to move into proximity with this person, um, who is my neighbor?
Mm. Mm. Rock, I really am taken back by some of these experiences. It causes me to think about what my own actions have been in my life towards those who have been my neighbor, and
Mm.
perhaps I didn't catch it. I didn't see it for what it could have been and should have been. So I appreciate you helping me and hopefully our listeners as well consider the bigger picture of our interactions with those around us, especially those who might be strangers but yet neighbors. And so thank you for that. Well, Rock, as we close, is there anything else on your mind that you just feel like you would like to share? I mean, it could be on anything. Is there just anything else that you just want to just share by way of this is what you've been thinking about, this is what you've been feeling, this is what you've just been pondering? Is there anything else as we close that you would just
Oh,
like to
Justin,
leave with
I
us?
just want to I'm going to share a bit of a poem, if that's
Please.
okay. That's been
I
on my
would love
mind
it.
since we've been talking, but I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the invitation and for your ability to show up. You say, how do I show
Mm.
up everywhere? I see you showing up in people's lives, and uh, showing up in my life. And so thank you for showing
Mm.
up. Thank you for your own vulnerability, and for this work,
Yeah.
because this is important work. So
Oh,
uh,
thank you, Rock.
the selection that I have on my mind is a poem from Saint Teresa of Avila,
Okay. Let's hear it.
known known to some of us, I'm sure. She died back in 1582, but her words continue to speak to me today. She says, Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes which he looks, compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes. You are his body. Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on the world. Christ has no body now on earth but yours. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rock. We love
Thank
you.
you.
We appreciate you. And I hope you continue to have an incredible impact on so many that you minister to and that you lead. Thank you, Rock.
Love you, Justin. Thank you. Thank you.